Now, we have incidents when sensors, sometimes even multiple types of sensors, detect things that we cannot explain.
The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had.
These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds.
So there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
What I personally witnessed myself and my wife was very disturbing.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still in the program.
Welcome back to Exoteria Healing. My name is Rio Kashyap, your spiritual mentor. The last time I was here was in January when I did a psychic reading for this year, 2024, and what it brings. So if you want to watch that, I will link it in the description and also on top somewhere here. I have actually watched the whole thing before. And since this had happened last year, there has been a lot of things, a lot of developments in the UFO, UAP / alien disclosure world. And some of those things are quite shocking, to be honest. Not to me, I always knew those things, but to the society at large, society in general. And I want to share all of that information with you because it is very important because of the changes that are coming in the whole world in the coming years. And there is some information that has been leaked that I will discuss in the next video that is truly life-changing, world-changing, and I think you should know that as well. So today I'm going to go through the whole UAP Congressional Hearing. It is more than 2 hours. It's 2 hours 20 minutes. So I will not put the whole thing in this video. I will be making cuts where there is either nothing happening or nothing significant. So I'll only be including the parts that are important. So come watch this with me because I know many of you don't even know about this existing because none of the news channels covered it. Only a few did. And I'm watching this on the CBS News channel. And before I begin, I just want to let you know what this hearing is all about. So there are people that have been trying to get the US government disclose that they have alien crafts and they have alien bodies to the whole world. But they are not doing that for obvious reasons because they want to conceal the technology and they want to work on the technology themselves, reverse engineer it, become the world power, become undefeatable, and earn lots of money from that. And this hearing came as a very, very big step in the world of UAP disclosure because the Congress finally held a hearing to listen to all these different people in the military, fighter pilots. And one of the officials whose name is David Grush came forward by saying that he has testimonies from more than, I think, 40 people, 30 or 40 people. And he also has specific names of organizations, locations, etc. And he could not divulge that information obviously publicly because it poses a threat to the national security of USA. So he gave that information to Congress under a closed room. So let's just begin watching this without further ado.
The lack of transparency regarding UAPs has fueled wild speculation and debate for decades, eroding public trust in the very institutions that are meant to serve and protect them, as is evidenced by the large number of people we have here. I also want to point out in 1966, President Gerald Ford claimed to have seen a UFO, and in 1969 in Georgia, Jimmy Carter claimed to have seen a UFO. So this has led Congress to establish entities to examine UAPs. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2022 established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, to conduct or to coordinate efforts across the Department of Defense and other federal agencies to detect, identify, and investigate UAPs. However, AARO's budget remains classified, prohibiting meaningful oversight from Congress.
I know I saw it in the crowd there, George Knapp, my buddy Jeremy Corbell. They're not witnesses, but they've provided some statements on this subject, and I seek unanimous consent to enter those statements into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
I just wanted to point out that how can the US military say that something that is moving about in their airspace without permission and sometimes not even showing up on radar, other times showing up on radar, unidentified, visually and also on the radar. So visually, if you see them, you can't identify what type of aircraft they are because we don't have them as humans, as far as we know, right? The other thing is that these aircraft or these UAPs, flying things, they are exhibiting such technology, such types of physics. They are breaking the laws of physics that we know today. Some of them are at one place 1 second, and the next second they are, I don't know, 2000 miles away. We don't have the technology to do that right now. And if there is something like that going about, which it is, then how is it not a threat to national security? And so that is a big load of BS.
But I'd also like to thank the members of Congress who have supported our efforts to make this hearing happen. Some have even confided to me that they've had UFO sightings of their own. Those members, of course, some of them wish to remain anonymous, and I'll keep it that way. But also, finally, I'd like to thank these three brave witnesses here. They took an oath. They took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and dadgummit, they're doing it. And we owe them a debt of gratitude. These folks, they've got nothing to gain from this, and I think you're going to find out that they've endured quite a few slings and arrows. We need to remember them in our prayers and their families. And I'm thankful to them for their honest testimonies. They have done interviews and appeared in documentaries like Accidental Truth to get their stories out there, and now they are all here to testify under oath for Congress. I propose legislation to go in the FAA reauthorization that just said if an airline pilot has a sighting, that when he makes that report to the FAA, that it would come to Congress. But I was told that the intelligence community did not like that, and the amendment was not even heard in committee. I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon they work for us. Dadgummit, we don't work for them.
The circumstances surrounding UAPs has captivated the attention of the American people for decades, ingrained in even the minds of our nation's leaders from Jimmy Carter to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump, Marco Rubio to Chuck Schumer, John Radcliffe to National Security Council officials. Yet from Roswell, New Mexico to the coast of Jacksonville, Florida, the sightings of UAPs have rarely been explained by the people who have firsthand accounts of these situations. This is largely due to the lack of transparency by our own government and the failure of our elected leaders to make good on their promises to release explanations and footage and mountains of overclassified documents that continue to be hidden from the American people. This isn't just how I feel. In fact, the American people largely believe that the government has actively covered up the truth about UAPs. One poll in particular found that 68% of Americans believe that the government is hiding information about UAPs and not being honest about what we know about them. And from my personal experience, I believe the same thing. Another poll found that nearly half Americans believe that the federal government is doing a very bad or somewhat bad job of dealing with reports of UFO sightings. As Representative Burchett just referenced on the FAA bill that just went through, you can tell that that's exactly happening. Considering the thousands of testimonies and videos taken on people's phones and eyewitnesses' accounts made by credible witnesses such as doctors, pilots, scientists, and active duty service members, it is unacceptable to continue to gaslight Americans into thinking that this is not happening or that the potential of intelligent life forms exists other than humans.
All right, so I wanted to discuss one thing here. Before, whenever anyone who is completely normal, like not in the government, not highly educated, or not in the military, whenever those people had sightings and whenever they came forward, their testimonies were dismissed, saying that this is not a credible witness. And that is so insulting to those people. Like, even if somebody is not educated, doesn't mean that whatever that person says is a lie. Doesn't mean that their testimony doesn't hold any value. Oftentimes, these types of experiences and sharing those experiences brings a lot of shame to these people. The society shuns them and makes their life miserable. So it is very hard for those witnesses to come forward. When fighter pilots, doctors, engineers, people high up in the government, people high up in the military started coming forward with their experiences, that was the time when people started saying that, okay, there is something there, which is again BS, because you should have already believed those are common folk as well. But let's say, okay, now we are believing people because they are credible now all of a sudden because they have an education. But even then, the government and the military and the Pentagon, they are still not believing in those witnesses, even when they are now the definition of credible, right? So basically, we can see that there is an agenda behind this. They want to hide it, and they want to hide it for as long as they can. But now with social media, now with everyone having a camera in their back pocket, people are coming forward with a lot of evidence, and they cannot hide it for a very long time. And that is why they have a full disclosure plan. And I will talk about that in detail in the coming videos. So let's continue with this one.
Even more alarming is the fact that these eyewitnesses are many of times service members and have no assurance that their lives will not be negatively impacted or even harmed by their experiences. In being an active duty service member working on an airfield, I've had conversations with many pilots where they were in fear of coming forward for retribution and or being taken off flight status. How do we know this? Because the government has said nothing to assure us otherwise. They have also did nothing to calm the concerns of over 20% of Americans who have reported to have seen UFOs or UAPs. We are simply told not to question the government and that the government has it under control. Today is the first hearing of its kind where we will attempt to get down to the bottom of what is actually happening with UAPs. But we will hear from people who have had personal sightings rather than Pentagon bureaucrats who have always been sent to stonewall our investigations. Just so that the press knows and the people know, we were even denied access to a classified briefing in a skiff prior to this hearing due to the amount of hoops that we had to jump through to grant temporary clearance to witness Grush, who has knowledge of classified information. It is time to have an open-minded discussion on this topic, to hear the evidence and understand the magnitude of what this means, not just for our nation, but for humanity.
Now, our witnesses will testify today that UAPs have posed a serious safety threat, and we must understand this. Now, some of the earliest reporting on this issue was a groundbreaking 2017 New York Times report, which revealed research, as we know now, on unidentified anomalous phenomena, or as many call UFOs, by the Defense Intelligence Agency. Now, we have incidents where sensors, sometimes even multiple types of sensors, detect things that we cannot explain.
Let me just increase the speed of this video. I just got this idea that I can increase the speed of this video to 1.25. That way we'll be able to get through this video faster and get all the information that we need.
You're not here to help a political party, but you're here to share information with the American people. And it's not something that is just going on in this administration. It's something that's spanned many administrations. For decades, many Americans have been fascinated by objects mysterious and unexplained, and it's long past time that they got some answers. The American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena. Those are not the words of a UFO Twitter account. Though that is a direct quote from Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, that the American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena. In an interview with Fox News, recent former Director of National Intelligence John Radcliffe confirmed the U.S. government is aware a lot more sightings of UAPs, and that they have not made that information public. I quote, "There are a lot more sightings that have not been made public," Radcliffe said to Fox News. For me, this hearing is about transparency. We unfortunately live in a time in which many people distrust government and our institutions, and overclassification of information away from the American public or even Congress contributes to today's politics. The American people have regular questions. What are UAPs? How come the media doesn't report more on them? Are they foreign adversaries? Are they U.S. technology? Are they something else? They ask themselves, how come when a Russian jet shoots flares at one of our drones, we have perfect pictures and videos to show the American people and the world? But when it comes to UAPs, nothing. Of course, we must always protect our national security to maintain our superiority, like when stealth helicopters were only rumored to exist, but were used in the Osama bin Laden raid in 2011. But we can't allow that to be used as a shield to keep the American people completely in the dark from basic truths. The American people deserve to hear more about special access programs. Congress has a right to know if there's any unsanctioned weapons development, satellite imagery that has not been provided to Congress. Congress created the All-Domain Resolution Office in the NDAA of 2022. In its initial analysis, there are 171 uncharacterized UAP reports, and this is the words from the report, that appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. I believe more information is known about the 171 instances. It's time for Congress to reinsert ourselves. I call on our military leaders and intelligence officials to release more information to the American people about UAPs. And to our military leaders, if there's nothing to conceal, let Congress go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the Dugway Proving Ground, or even Groom Lake in Nevada. We should have disclosure today. We should have disclosure tomorrow. The time has come. Thank you, Ranking Member.
Right, now I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Lieutenant Ryan Graves. He's the Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace. Lieutenant Graves is also a former U.S. Navy F-18 pilot with his own UAP experience. The next witness, David Grush, is a former senior intelligence officer with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and was a senior technical advisor for UAP issues. And finally, retired Navy Commander David Fravor, squadron leader who worked as a naval aviator for 18 years. Mr. Fravor has his own UAP experience, known as the TikTok event. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves, and I'm a former F-18 pilot with a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. I have experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrew and military veterans who have confided their similar encounters with me. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses, and is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony. Parts of our government are aware of more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust. In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers. And I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft.
It was a dark gray or a dark black cube inside of a sphere. That is so out there. Like, how can you ignore something like that? And also notice that he is saying that as soon as he was stationed, he started noticing them on radars here and there, and then visually. If it is so easy for people to notice them on these stations, why were they hiding this information all these years? That is because their very livelihoods were threatened when they spoke up. That's why they said it's good to just shut up and keep on living rather than speaking up. But that is changing now.
Estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs. The majority of witnesses are commercial pilots at major airlines. Often, they are veterans with decades of flying experience. Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them at 40,000 feet, potentially in low Earth orbit or in the gray zone below the Kármán line, making inexplainable maneuvers like right-hand turns and retrograde orbits or J-hooks.
Okay, he mentioned right-hand turns and them being in the range of 40,000 feet and above. The one that I saw when I was a child, it was going at a very high speed and then stopping just point blank and making right-hand turns at such high speeds. I mean, imagine if you're able to look at an object in the sky, which is like thousands of feet above. If you're able to look at that object going from one point to another, which is like, you can say 30 degrees across the sky and stop all of a sudden, you can imagine that that object was at a very high speed. And I don't believe they are dismissing that. They are studying these things. They have these things in their possession, which we will learn in this UAP hearing. And it's just that they don't want us to know, which is not good. Let's continue.
These reports are reoccurring, with numerous recent sightings north of Hawaii and in the North Atlantic. Other veterans are also coming forward to us regarding UAP encounters in our airspace and oceans. The most compelling involve observations of UAP by multiple witnesses and sensor systems. I believe these accounts are only scratching the surface, and more will share their experiences once it is safe to do so. In closing, I recognize the skepticism surrounding this topic. If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue. Thank you.
My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2023, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARRO.
He said he was in charge of transmedium object analysis. And he's going to explain what exactly that means. So let's continue.
Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP Task Force and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Air Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended, and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves, so the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All 4 of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down a small, saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look at the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We considered 270 degrees and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingman, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cat point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken. And after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 until Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lou Elizondo. And there was an official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted. And I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lou had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice, and others to form To the Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Kean, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times, and it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles open the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but figuring out where these craft are, where are they from, the technology they possess, how do they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA. There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have firsthand knowledge, and Mr. Grush just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe it, not from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure that could undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances works across all work done in the government using taxpayer funds. Relative to government programs, even unacknowledged WAVE programs have some level of oversight by the appropriate committee members in the House and Senate, and this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower testimonies should not be exempt. In closing, I would like to say that the Tic Tac object we engaged in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Fravor, the Tic Tac incident that you were engaged occurred in 2004. What kind of reporting took place after that incident?
None. We had a standard debrief where the backseaters went down to our carrier intel center and briefed what had happened, and that was it. No one else talked to us, and I was in the top 20 in the battle group. No one came. The captain was aware, the admiral was aware, nothing was done.
Your commanding officers provide any sort of justification?
No, because I was a commanding officer of the squadron, so no. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
That down two ways. First, when we were first experiencing these objects off the eastern seaboard in the 2014 to 2015 time period, anyone that had upgraded their radar systems were seeing these objects. So there was a large number of my colleagues that were detecting these objects off the eastern seaboard. They were further correlating that information with the other onboard sensors, and many of them also had their own eye sightings as well of these objects. Now, that was our personal first-hand experience at the time. Since then, as I've engaged this topic, others have reached out to me to share their experiences, both on the military side as well as the commercial aviation side. On the military aviation side, veterans that have recently got out have shared their stories and have expressed how the objects we were seeing in 2014, 2015 continued all the way to 2019, 2020, and beyond. And so it became a generational issue for naval aviators on the eastern seaboard. This was something we were briefing to new students. This is something that was included in the notice to airmen to ensure that there was no accidents. And now with commercial aviators, they're reaching out because they're having somewhat similar experiences as our military brothers and sisters, but they do not have any reporting system that they can send us to.
Mr. Grush, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General, and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Mr. Graves, again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's zero airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Mr. Favor, do you believe that you witnessed an additional object under the water in relation to your encounter?
I will say we did not see an object. There was something there to cause the whitewater, and when we turned around, it was gone, so there was something there that obviously moved.
Okay, it was not the same object, though, that you were looking at, correct?
No, we actually joked that the Tic Tac was communicating with something when we came back, and because the whitewater disappeared.
We were, in another instance, we're told about the capabilities of a jamming during viewing of when there were some people chasing some of these objects. Did you experience any of that jamming or interrupting your radar or weapons system?
My crew that launched after we landed experienced significant jamming to the APG-73 radar, which was what we had on board, which is a mechanically scanned, very high-end system prior to the APG-79. And yes, it did pretty much everything you could do, range, velocity, aspect, and then it spit the lock, and the targeting pod is passive. That's what we were able to get the video on.
I'm about to run out of time, but are you aware of any of our enemies that have that capability?
No.
Are there common characteristics to the UAPs that have been cited by different pilots, and can you describe what the convergence of descriptions is?
Certainly. We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
I'm sorry, dark gray or black cubes?
Yes, inside of a clear sphere, where the apex or tips of the cube were touching the inside of that sphere. And that was primarily what was being reported when we were able to gain a visual tally of these objects. And that occurred over almost 8 years. And as far as I know, it's still occurring.
How do you account for that response? That seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially, the career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder. And when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off. But I'm here to represent those people.
You received prior approval from the Defense Department to speak on certain issues, correct?
Correct, through DOPSR, DoD Pre-Publication and Security Review. And I just want to remind the public, they're just looking from a security perspective. These are my own personal views and opinions, not the department's.
Okay, I'm asking that, though, mainly because I think that there are many people that would like to discredit you. So it does bring a certain amount of credibility to your testimony.
I'm required by law to do that as a former intelligence officer, or I go to jail for revealing classified information.
Yeah, we don't want you to go to jail. My next question would actually be for Mr. Graves. Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Certainly. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you would be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they've described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything personally that large.
Okay, and then another question on follow-up referencing the gimbal video Go Fast incident. Can you just clarify, because to our understanding, the footage was actually cut off at a certain point, but what happens at the end of that video, just for those Americans specifically that are wanting to know about the rest of that footage?
Certainly. There was some uncertainty or instability with the object. It seemed to rock a bit, and that's the last I had seen of the video. Much of the data that I would recommend be analyzed would consist of radar data that would provide precise kinematics on the object, as well as the fleet of objects that were operating nearby.
Okay, and follow-up, in regards to the reporting procedures that Mr. Garcia had addressed on, as well as Representative Burchett, with the FAA, to your understanding, pilots that are seeing this, commercial airline pilots, are they receiving cease and desist letters from corporations for coming forward with information in regards to safety for potential airline passengers?
I have been made privy to conversations with commercial aviators who have received cease and desist orders.
So the American public should know that corporations are putting their own reputations on the basic, not the line, but ahead of the safety of the American people. And I think, would you agree with that statement?
It appears so.
Okay.
Mr. Graves and Commander Favor, I heard you talk about speed. When those objects broke the sound barrier, did they make a sonic boom?
I was in a jet. You can't hear anything. It's kind of loud in there.
Yeah, you're not able to actually personally tell within the vehicle. I will say the objects that we were seeing, they were spherical, and they were observed up to Mach 2, which is a very non-aerodynamic shape.
What about G-forces? Let's talk about G-forces of those vehicles. Could a human survive those G-forces with known technology today?
No.
No, not for the acceleration rates that we observed.
Okay. What about what they look like? How close did you get? Did you see a seam or a rivet or a section? And what I mean is, obviously, the jets you're flying have all those things. Did these objects have those?
So we got within a half mile of Tic Tac, which people say that's pretty far, but in airplanes, that's actually relatively close. No, it was perfectly white, smooth, no windows, although when we did take the original FLIR video that is out there, when you put it on a big screen, it actually had two little objects that came out of the bottom of it. But other than that, no windows, no seams, no nothing.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace department programs, yeah.
Satellite imagery. Let's talk about satellite imagery. We have satellites all over the place, some that we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point and second. Mr. Grush, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or have you talked to people with direct knowledge that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, and of course I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date. But I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that I could not even explain prosaically. And I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately. And I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you had spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay. Do you have any information that the U.S. government is involved in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview because it touches other sensitivities.
Okay.
Mr. Garouche, in your sworn testimony, you state that the United States government has retrieved supposedly extraterrestrial spacecraft and other UAP-related artifacts. You go so far as to state that the U.S. is in possession of, quote, non-human spacecraft, end quote, and that some of these artifacts have circulated with defense contractors. Several other former military and intelligence officials have come forward with similar allegations, albeit in non-public settings. However, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO, previously testified before Congress that there has been, and I quote, no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity or of, quote, off-world technology brought to the attention of the office. To your knowledge, is that statement correct?
It's not accurate. I believe Dr. Kirkpatrick mentioned he had about 30 individuals that have come to Aero thus far. A few of those individuals have also come to Aero that I also interviewed, and I know what they provided Dr. Kirkpatrick and their team.
Okay.
I was able to evaluate that information.
I need to go on.
Sure.
But my understanding that his statement is accurate, came from a direct quote. And this contradiction is a perfect example of why we need to inject transparency into our government. And for another example, look no further than the pitiful response to the Chinese spy balloon debacle earlier this year. You may remember the mass confusion that ensued when the balloon was first spotted over Montana, 4 days after it first entered U.S. airspace over Alaska. The Biden administration's initial inability to address the object grew into a continuous series of embarrassments. After news of the balloon reached the mainstream media, we were assured that the balloon posed no threat to our security. However, after the balloon was allowed to transit the entire continental United States, fighter jets were scrambled off the coast of South Carolina to shoot it down. This flip-flopping and obfuscation caused needless confusion, fear, and panic across the country. It's my hope, Mr. Chairman, that this sort of confusion will not be repeated. We should investigate the extent to which elements of our government possess or do not possess information that is of critical value to the American people. We owe it to the citizens of this nation to make sure that our government is transparent and accountable. We must make sure that our government provides answers, and Congress must do its duty to solicit those answers. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
She's the boss. Really admire whatever she said there. I mean, she had some really hard-hitting words and perspectives. That whole balloon thing that happened, like, it put everything into perspective. Everything that they do with any other UAP as well, and their inefficiency, basically.
Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Right. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Okay. Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases that the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress have talked about we're going to go to Area 51, and there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just, and we move like a glacier. And as soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans would pull up, but please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
Which private corporations are directly involved in this program? How much taxpayer money has been invested in these programs, to your knowledge? I mean, we know we audit the Pentagon every year, and I've been here 5 years, and they fail the dadgum thing every year. They lose over $1 billion a year, we think, and I've told the Department of Defense maybe 60% of their assets are unaccounted for, whatever the heck that means. In the public sector, you go to jail for that kind of crap. So tell me.
Yeah, I know when I'm $1 off of my DTS travel voucher, I get hammered, but it seems like it doesn't work the other way.
If you sell over $600 worth of stuff on eBay now, you get a call from the IRS. So please, what corporations?
Yeah, I don't know the specific metrics towards the end of your question. The specific corporations I did provide to the committees in specific divisions, and I spent 11 and a half hours with both Intel committees. So.
Okay, has there been an active U.S. government disinformation campaign to deny the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena? And if so, why?
I can't go beyond what I've already espoused publicly about that.
What have you stated publicly in your interviews for the congressional record?
If you reference my News Nation interview, and I talk about a multi-decade, campaign to disenfranchise public interest, basically. Yeah.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. Next.
So this is what the US government does. Okay, this is their forte. I just recently listened to an episode about FBI and their dirty deeds on Bailey Sarian's podcast. If you watch her, she's great. It was about how FBI tried to infiltrate various civil rights movements that were popping up in the 1900s when people were trying to take their, civil rights back. Black people, women. FBI tried to stop them in every possible way, and one of those ways were infiltrating their groups from within by picking up people such as young Black men who were about to go to jail for some reason and telling them that we will clean off your record only if you infiltrate the movement and basically implode it from within and give us their secrets and give us the floor plans so that we can, come in and attack them and kill the leader and things like that. So they've killed people, they've infiltrated movements from within and imploded those movements, making them unsuccessful. Well, finally they were successful, but initially they tried a lot like this. And the whole world knows about it. And why has FBI not been held responsible for it? Number one. Number two, it is still going on. And it's not just the FBI, it's the Pentagon and it's the whole US military. And now they did the same thing with the UFO UAP disclosure as well. So there were many groups that were trying to disclose the stuff about UAPs and everything we know about them and all the secrets, etc. CIA, and they infiltrated those groups pretending to be UAP enthusiasts and experts and spread misinformation that later came out to be, not true and fake and a hoax, and then it tarnishes the image of the whole movement, right? But as they say, truth will out. So you cannot stop truth from coming out forever. There will be a day when it will come out, just as it came out with all the dirty deeds that FBI did in the history. And it makes me really happy to see that there are people who value integrity, who value truth, and who are willing to put their careers online. People like these three witnesses. And they actually are fighting such a big entity, an entity that can destroy their careers, their families, their whole freaking life. They're still doing it because they value truth the most. And this is the kind of people, this is the kind of generation we want to develop going forward.
I'm going to take you to specific instances around the Phoenix Valley, because that's where I live. In 97, we had the famous Phoenix light case. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. There were two things that went along with that, and the explanation was military training range off Luke and the Barry Goldwater range. Do you know anything different other than the official explanation of those lights?
The Phoenix lights, I watched a lot of detail about that on the Y-Files YouTube channel. They came to the conclusion after their research that it was just some lights from the highway which were, bending because of the cold atmosphere. There's something called as mirage, which works in the desert when you see trees or when you see an oasis at a distance, when you see water, but then when you go there, there is no water there. And that is because of the mirage effect, because the air is so hot, is somehow refracting light in a way that you are able to see the reflection of the sky on the ground. There is a counterpart of this phenomena which happens when the air is extremely cold, and it brings out things that are below the horizon, above the horizon. So if there is let's say a boat that is below your horizon, it's so far away, because of the mirage it will look like it is floating up in the air at a distance. For the Phoenix lights, they concluded that it was something like that happening with the highway that was at a distance, and all the lights that you were seeing floating in the air were actually the lights from the cars on the highway. While it could be a plausible explanation, but I think more happened with Phoenix lights than just looking at the lights going about.
If we wanted to, just my question along with my colleague from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, if we wanted to find out more about that, where would we go to find the files, and who would we address? And are you going to tell me we need to go to a SCIF so you can tell us in a SCIF?
I could potentially give you a vector on that. That specific case, I'm familiar with it in terms of public, but I give you a vector in closed environment, yeah.
That would be good, thank you.
And so I want to get down to, if we can, some specifics, right? So at one point you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured. And the activity... By UAPs or by people within the federal government? Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed, myself and my wife, was very disturbing.
Okay. One of my constituents actually sent this next question, and I figured I'd ask it since I had the same thought. You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
Okay, and so with that being said, the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system, and the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched.
This is very important. I see this argument over and over and over. They just can't fathom that how can these beings, if they are so technologically advanced, crash. And the thing is, number one, they might not be coming from outside. Number two, we are actually using technology and data that we received from perhaps one crashed craft, and we are using that to down them, to bring them down ourselves. Let's hear what Grush has to say.
And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, and number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we can probably argue about that.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring?
Only a theoretical framework discussion. Yes.
Okay. These aircraft, have they been identified that they are being produced by domestic, military and contractors? Is there any evidence that that's what's being recovered?
Not to my knowledge, plus the recoveries predate a lot of our advanced programs that I previously am witting of, so.
Would it be safe to say that there could be a scenario today where you have an aircraft that crashes, and because it's been involved in one program from one federal agency, but the agency that retrieves it is not aware of that program, and to them it appears alien in origin?
I mean, that's a hypothetical situation. I'm not aware of any historical situation that would match that you described. So
you're not aware? It has not happened that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of.
Several months ago, my office received a protected disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I sought a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all of the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America, and we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. And I'm somewhat informed on the matter, having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on the committee that oversees DARPA and advanced technologies for several years. When we spoke with the flight crew, and when he showed us the photo that he'd taken, I asked why the video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico. And when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace. Not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb. Again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down. He said that his FLIR system malfunctioned and that he had to manually take this image from one of the lenses, and it was not automated in collection as you would typically see in a test mission. So I guess I'll start with Commander Fravor. How should we think about the fact that this craft that was approached by our pilot had the capability of disarming a number of the sensor and collection systems on that craft?
Well, I think this goes to that national security side. You can go back through history of things showing up at certain areas and disabling our capabilities, which is disheartening. And for us, I mean, like I said, it completely disabled the radar on the aircraft when it tried to do it. And the only way we could see it is passively, which is how he got that image. So I think that's a concern on what are these doing, not only how do they operate, but their capabilities inside to do things like this.
And how should we think about 4 craft moving in a very clear formation, equidistant from one another, in a diamond? In all of the phenomenon, perhaps, Mr. Grave, that you've analyzed, have we ever seen multiple craft in a single formation?
I have one particular case, and that was during the gimbal incident. The recording on the AT FLIR system shows a single object that rotates. You hear the pilots refer to a fleet of objects that is not visible on the FLIR system, and that was something that I witnessed during the debrief as part of the radar data on the situational awareness page. I would like to add, however, Congressman, there's a small bit of anger, I would say I would feel that those pilots are still facing that difficulty in reporting this topic, and they don't have the tools to be able to mitigate this issue. It just goes to show how serious this is and why this is such an important issue for our pilots and for our nation.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people. And that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth. Mr. Chairman, I would observe that perhaps as we move forward from this hearing, there are some obvious next steps. Every person watching this knows that we need to meet with Mr. Grush in a secure, compartmentalized facility so that we can get fulsome answers that do not put him in jeopardy and that give us the information we need. Second, I would suggest that the radar images that were collected of this formation of craft out of Eglin Air Force Base, and specifically the actual image taken by the actual flight crew that we can actually validate, be provided to the committee, subpoenaed if necessary, so that we're able to track how to get this type of reporting and analysis done in a more fulsome way. That would be my recommendation, humbly, as a guest here of the Fine Oversight Committee. I yield back.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program. I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super. Thank you. And I yield back.
Can you describe how the aircraft maneuvered?
Abruptly, very determinate. It knew exactly what it was doing. It was aware of our presence, and it had acceleration rates. I mean, it went from 0 to matching our speed in no time at all.
Now, if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do these maneuvers that you saw, would it be capable of doing that?
No, not even close.
And just to confirm, this object had no wings, correct?
No wings.
Now, was the aircraft that you were flying, was it armed?
No, never felt threatened at all.
If the aircraft was armed, do you believe that your aircraft or any aircraft in possession of the United States could have shot the Tic Tac down?
I'd say no. Just on the performance, it would just left in a split second.
It looks like that we have a problem here that needs further investigation.
Yes.
In your belief, is this flying Tic Tac, I mean, is it capable of being the product of any other nation on the Earth?
No, like I said earlier, I think it defies current material science and the ability to develop that much propulsion. And I know there's been some physicists that have done calculations, which is beyond anything that we have. No, it's been said it's probably the most credible UFO sighting in history based on all the sensors that were tracking it, and then for us to get visual and to go against the naysayers that it's something on the screen or whatever. I mean, there's 4 sets of human eyeballs. We're all very credible. Of the 6 of us that were involved in the thing, including the video, every one of us is going to do 20 plus years in the military in very responsible positions. So I'd say the world needs to know that. It's not a joke.
Mr. Grush, I might have asked this before, but I want to make sure. Do you have any personal knowledge of someone who's possibly been injured working on legacy UAP reverse engineering?
Yes.
Okay. How were they injured? Is it something like a radioactive type situation or something we didn't understand? I've heard people talk about Havana syndrome type incidences. What was your recollection of that?
I can't get into specifics, but you can imagine assessing an unknown. There's a lot of potentialities you can't fully prepare for.
What is the most vivid, concrete sighting with the naked eye of the objects that you described before, the cube-like objects?
Certainly. I think the most vivid sighting of that would have been near midair that we had at the entrance to our working area. One of these objects was completely stationary at the exact entrance to our working areas, not only geographically, but also at altitude. So it was right where all the jets are going, essentially, on the eastern seaboard. The 2 aircraft flew within about 50 feet of the object, and that was a very close visual sighting.
And you were in one of the aircraft?
I was not. I was there when the pilot landed. He canceled the mission after, and I was there. He was in the ready room with all his gear on, with his mouth open, and I asked him what the problem was, and he said he almost hit one of those darn things.
He said he was 50 feet away from it?
Yes, sir.
And his description of the object was consistent with the description you gave us before?
A dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere.
Inside of a clear sphere?
Yes.
And with no self-evident propulsion system?
No wings, no IR energy coming off of the vehicle, nothing tethering it to the ground. And that was primarily what we were experiencing out there.
Clear cube, and there's a dark sphere inside of it. He also talks about a red cube the size of a football stadium. I think that's huge. All right, that was the end of the UAP Congressional Hearing. They keep mentioning David Grush's News Nation interview. So the next video, we will be watching David Grush's full News Nation interview, and it has come out in parts. So we'll be covering all the parts together. And if you still don't happen to believe in this phenomena, I hope this helps you get back to reality. I mean, the world where you live in denial is not the real world. This is the real world where all these things are happening routinely. And recently I came across a channel where he posts a video almost every single day of these weird objects flying about in the California Bay Area. Whenever there is a known flying object in the sky, such as an airplane, parasailer, etc. And he has to get a 8K 240 FPS camera now to record them properly, but whatever he's able to record on his 4K camera, he is sharing. He has to slow down the footage to a lot to even have them appear on a single frame in the video, and that's how fast they are. So this was very interesting to do today. Let's hear what David Grush has to say more in his News Nation interview next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day in this new world.